Well, there's been some discussion on Ukulele Underground about tipples and well, 8 and 10 string ukuleles, and I thought I'd give a little bit of the history of how they came about. The Portuguese sailors cruising around the world after Columbus set out, discovered the New World. Uh, Eventually, they landed in Hawaii, and they brought with them an instrument called the rajo. This is a rajo. It has 5 strings, and the interesting thing about it is that it has 2 re-entrant strings. You know how a piano goes from low to high, and a guitar goes from low to high. Well, the rajo went from high to low to high. Spot, my dog has fleas. It was five-string instrument, and the Portuguese, when they went to work in the fields in Hawaii, commerce was developing. Worldwide commerce was developing, and they would take the rajo out in the field with them and play them. And the Hawaiians called it the Taropatch Fiddle. That was their slang for it. And they play the traditional folk music. And the way it was tuned is Spot, my dog has fleas. It had the re-entrant tuning of the ukulele. My dog has fleas. It also had a low D string. Same as the D on the C string. C string D, open string D. And then the next string is an open string G, but the 3rd fret on the E string. So it had 2 re-entrant strings. It gives it a very cool sound to it, because those 2 notes, they're not exactly the same, but the thing about it basically uses guitar chords without the big E string. It happens to be in a different key. It's like putting a capo on the guitar on the 5th fret. 5th fret. This was made in the 1998 by Carlos Jorge Rodriguez Pereira in Madeira. A great instrument maker, traditional instrument maker there. Well, in 1879, a bunch of Madeirans, an island off the coast of North Africa, kind of south of the Rock of Gibraltar, belonging to Portugal. They came. They were having problems in Madeira. They had a failure of the what do they have? Sugarcane crop. They had a big failure there. So they were looking for places to work, and they wound up in Hawaii because Hawaii needed workers. And there was a guy named Ju Fernandez. He didn't have a Braguinha, but someone else did on the boat, 1879, and he borrowed it. And as he got off the Ravenscraig ship that brought 230 some people to Hawaii, he was playing a Madeiran tune on a little tiny instrument called the Braguinha. And the Braguinha, the people who populated the island of Madeira after it was discovered by someone working for Prince Henry the Navigator, came from the community, the province of Braga in Portugal. It was a Celtic community. So the Celts the Portuguese Celts settled the island of Braguinha, and they brought with them the Portuguese Celts from Braga brought with them the Braguinha, what they called the Braguinha, the little Braga, the instrument. They brought it to Madeira, and the Celts settled Madeira. They actually Madeira means wood. And they got named wood because it was covered with trees. And they burned some of the trees to make way for, growing crops. And they wound up burning the whole island down, But one of the things that happened is it gave the soil this great potash, which was good for the Malmsey grape. And Madeira wine became very worldwide known, because the soil grew it pretty well. Have some Madeira, and when the American colonists declared the Declaration of Independence, they celebrated by raising high a glass of Madeira. So I got around. So this little instrument, they say that Jules Fernandez came down the gangplank off the Ravenscraig, playing very quite energetically, this little thing. Now, I went to Madeira in 1998 we took the ukulele back to the island of Madeira because it kind of came from there. They didn't know it yet, so we took it back and we taught Madeirans how to play the ukulele, and they taught me how to play the Braguinha, and we did a few shows, and then we played at the World's Fair in Lisbon. And the Madeirans brought to the table in our project, Father and Son Reunion, the Braguinha meets the ukulele. They brought to the table songs that they believed were being played in Madeira at the time that the Ravenscraig left Madeira for Hawaii. So we learned songs like very much, the Madeiran songs are really tied to the dances that they did to stomp the wheat to get the grain out, and they have some interesting rhythms. I don't own very many of those rhythms, but I like to conjure them, and so who knows what Jules Fernandez was actually playing when he got off the boat. But the Madeiran folk musicians to this day, they taught us Americans a few songs, and it kind of went like this. So on that ship, there were three Madeiran woodworkers, and they went to Hawaii believing that they were going to be, serving the countrymen who were already there. When they got there, there just wasn't a whole lot of work for them. Manuel Nunez and his two buddies. Now, Manuel Nunez, his older brother, Octaviano Nunez, was the master luthier on the island of Madeira, and made violins and things. And Nunez had those skills himself, and they were in a pickle. They didn't have any work to do, really. They could work in the fields, but they were woodworkers, and they needed to do that kind of stuff. So they, out of desperation, sort of, they noticed how the Hawaiians, when Jules came off the boat playing this little instrument, the Hawaiians were tickled by that. And they knew that David Kalakaua was a guitar player. King David Kalakaua was a guitar player. And they knew that the Rajol, which Hawaiians call the Taropatch Fiddle because the Portuguese took it out into the fields when they worked. Played it at lunchtime, you know. So they decided, and they used guitar chords. And David Kalakaua could play guitar, and the Braguinha is really tuned to an open G string, you know, open G chord. D, G, B, D. So, but it takes different chord formation than a guitar. So, but what they did is they took these 4 strings off of this instrument, and I learned that back in the 80s. I'd done a gig in Nevada City at a place called Cowboy Pizza, and I put out a little press release, and I told a little bit of the history that the ukulele came from the Braguinha, and I got a call from a guy, A.C. Fox. He told me the article was talking about his family. He was the great grandson of Manuel Nunez, and his mother had come to California in 1915 to teach ukulele at the Pan Pacific Exposition. Her name was Flora Fox. And he said, she's going to be 104 years old this month. And I said, what? Whoa, what day? October 29th. Well, that's my birthday. October 29th, of course, I won't be 104 for a while. But so he gave me her phone number, and I called her up, and I told her I'd like to come visit her on her birthday. And she says, you're a ukulele player? And I said, yes, I am. She said, well, come on over. We'll tear up the town. So I went over to Santa Rosa, California, to an old folks' home, and she was there, and she had a Leonardo Nunez ukulele hanging on her wall. Leonardo Nunez was Manuel Nunez's son and her father, who made ukuleles in his lifetime as well. And she told me that her grandfather, on whose lap she had sat as a child, had taken 4 strings off of the big one and put it on the little one, and that became the ukulele. And that wasn't the known history at the time. But when I went to Madeira and I pulled out my ukulele and strummed it, the Madeirans went, oh, Rajo. They didn't go, oh, Braguinha. They went, oh, Rajo. So they were talking about this. So this is the 5-string instrument Flora Fox was talking about. So what they did, so anyway, now this is a ukulele made by Manuel Nunez. It's an old one, coal wood. It's got, rope binding on it and wooden pegs with slots on the top rather than holes. And it's kind of, it goes out of tune easy because these guys are dried out. It's probably over 100 years old, this instrument, made by Manuel Nunez. So anyway, they took the ukulele to David Kalakaua. They didn't call it a ukulele, they called it a mini Rajo. And, ukulele has a lot of meanings. Ooh, still out of tune. No, actually, what happened there is I played the Braguinha chord, which was dissonant on this instrument. So anyway, King David Kalakaua could play it right away because it was basically the guitar chords with a short neck and no bass strings. And they loved the sound of it. And it wasn't very long, it became the first souvenir of any country. If you went to Hawaii, you had to come home with a ukulele. Of course, in the 1800s, coal wood was still pretty abundant. basically how the ukulele came about. And then, it got really popular after 1915 San Francisco Pan Pacific Exposition. But in time, some of the players wanted louder noise. And so Manuel Nunez, he decided to double the strings. And this is I got an old 8-string. I don't know who made this one, but it's made, you've got the rope binding, and it has the back has a little tongue. The back has a tongue that meets the neck, and there's no fretboard on top of the neck that sits on top of the frets end right at the neck. That's how they were originally made. And Manuel Nunez was made the same way. You notice there's no fretboard on top of the neck, and the frets stop right at the neck, and it's got this little tang here on the back. It's part of the back. Today they don't do that. That doesn't happen that way. They don't put the top on there like that. They put the fretboard on top, and it usually comes over the top of the body a little bit. So here's a Taropatch. Manuel Nunez, he appropriated the name. The Hawaiians called the Rajo a Taropatch Fiddle, and when he doubled up the strings, he decided to call it a Taropatch. And not sure if this inside here. Well, it just says instrumental. And Manuel Nunez and Sons, inventor of the ukulele, Taropatch and Fiddles in Hawaii, Honolulu, 1879, manufactures of stringed instruments. So, when this one was made, he was already making Taropatches. He called it Taropatch. He called this a Taropatch, appropriated the nickname of the Rajo. Although it's not a Rajo, it's got the My Dog Ashley's tuning with only basically 4 strings, 4 notes. It does have a lot of volume. So I've not been able to find the name of anything on this. See, can't find the name, and it's been restored by Luke Wilson in Nevada City. We put peg head tuners on it, which gives a 4-to-1 gear ratio that look like the old time ones. A lot more volume out of one of these. They're coming back. Paula makes one. So that's how we got to the Taropatch. Now there was another discussion about 10-string instrument. Well, that's not called a Taropatch. And Martin made a few of them. It's called a Tiple. I don't know how they got to call it a Tiple. I don't know where the name came film, but it still has 4 courses. But first 2 are doubled. The next 2, the C string is 2 high strings, 2 high notes, and 1 low one. So there's 3 strings. And then the E is 3 strings, high, middle, and high, and then 2 A strings. And it's got a lot of sound. Little, and it's steel strings too. But just like a ukulele, because it's basically a ukulele with a lot of strings. You know, if you got stuck on an island with just this, I don't know if you would have time to go, you know, collect coconuts. You know, there were black blues players in the South that used Tiples. I don't have their names offhand. You can look them up. So that's the journey from the Taropatch to the Braguinha to the new Taropatch, or actually Taropatch Fiddle, I guess. Taropatch Fiddle, or Rajol, to the Braguinha. Also, they used to call it the machete. Like rock and rollers today, they call their guitars axes. Well, the Libertarians call it the machete. So it's pretty much the same thing, right? And came on, and of course, the original ukulele from Manuel Nunez and his buddies. And I hope that opens the windows for you. Keep playing.